We are recording.
Awesome. Well, go ahead.
I'm going to start the broadcast.
Sweet. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Broadcast just started, so we might get some visitors here soon. It looks like everybody's pretty familiar with Zoom. If you're not, bottom left-hand corner, you can mute yourself, let your audio be seen. Top right-hand corner, you can switch from the speaker view, so whoever's speaking is front and center, to a gallery view so you can see everybody. I'm on the gallery view, so I can see everybody at once. If you want to say anything, you can either raise your hand at the bottom part of your screen, and then Jeremy will make sure you're unmuted and all that, or I will. Today we'll start with the agenda. We'll review the agenda, go to review the notes from February. Obviously things have been a little bit crazy, so we're going to do commissioner comments right after that, and then public comments later down, assuming that's okay with you all, of course. And then after the public comments of the chief's report, and then at the very end, our closing comments, we'll get a chance to respond to any public comments. Since I don't think this will be the last time we do this, maybe I'm wrong, but since I don't think this will be the last time, this is probably the format we'll use next time around as well. So feel free to develop any feedback you have over this meeting and send it to me. I want to make this as effective as possible. And thank you all to everybody who sent in questions for last month's video, and thank you, Chief, for answering them. But does that agenda sound okay for everybody?
Sure.
Okay. I'm not seeing anybody who looks unhappy, so we'll count that as unanimous approval for the agenda and the notes. I'll give you a chance to open it up, read through the notes. I haven't seen anything, but I am not as good of an editor as Terry is. So.
What are you smiling at?
Silver has it.
Before we start, Sean, do you want us to mute our mic if we're not speaking? Or do you want us to keep it on? Or
if there's background noises, by all means mute your mic. I mute my mic off of a little handy dandy button, so mine won't show that I'm muted. But if there's no background noises, I don't care either way.
Okay, thank you.
Sean, I don't have a reaction capability or question.
A question. Maybe it's just unmuting them then. Maybe that raising your hand is only for public participants.
Okay.
Do you think that's accurate, Jeremy?
Yeah, Sean, I believe that's correct.
Okay. Then I will just keep Q the same way I always have. So if you want to say something, just wave at me and I'll be able to see it because I'm on gallery view, and I'll add you to the stack. Oh, and I forgot the actual business of the agenda as well. We'll be looking at, obviously, the chief's report. And then we'll have a couple of other policies to look at that aren't specifically, to do with the current pandemic, but making sure business stays a little bit, keeps going despite everything. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
This is Alan, so moved.
Awesome. Anybody second?
I'll second.
Sweet. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
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 Seeing aye from everybody, unanimous approval, and we'll move on to commissioner comments. I'm just going to go down the list I've got. So Will Davey, you are up first.
Okay. Can you hear me?
1 sec. Sorry, Jeremy.
John, I'm not sure if we made it entirely clear that for those that do want to make public comment, if they could please raise their hand now, so that and we probably want to make a couple more reminders of that. Since
Yes.
It's not the normal. Okay.
Okay. Anybody who does want to make public comment, it will be around 6:15 or so. So I'll remind everybody who's watching. I can't see him, so I keep forgetting about him. But go ahead, Will.
Okay. everybody knows, I suppose, that EPD has a small army of volunteers that normally do a lot of work around the department and for the department. But it's been on hold. The whole program has been on hold since the virus came to visit us. I am a volunteer, so I happen to know about this, I think, pretty wonderful phenomenon. Lindy Smith, the volunteer coordinator, has been from her home putting out a daily newsletter for all the volunteers. Started off just telling us what she's been doing, what her kids are doing, with photographs, telling their activities, really nice. And she invited other volunteers to share as well, and she'd put that into the next day newsletter. And it's been just a delight, I think. Lots of people have responded. Well, okay, mostly the same ones over and over again, but I think it's been a terrific morale booster for the volunteer community. People, I think, maybe I'm hallucinating, but I think that volunteer people are feeling more connected to the department than they otherwise would. And I think it reflects, this whole thing reflects something of the positive spirit that we'd like to see in the department, often do see. And so I just wanted the commission and others to know about Lindy Smith's efforts to keep morale up. And I think it's been a really great guns sort of thing she's done. That's all.
Awesome, thank you. Amanda, and then V will be after you.
Sure. So, hello. It's nice to see everybody again. Let's see. Human Rights Commission. Oh, hold on with that. Ollie. Shh. My son's, he's playing video games. Human Rights Commission, we're getting back into the swing of things as well. And just recently voted to put some funding toward the Oregon Worker Relief Fund. So Human Rights Commission has this pot of money that we can use to fund organizations doing human rights activities. So we've decided to put the rest of it, what we have left for this year, toward that organization. That's the only update I have for now.
V, and then Matt will be next.
I think I don't have anything to add. I was waving earlier. I don't know why, but you probably thought I had something to comment, but I really don't. So you could pass me by.
No worries. Matt, and then Lindsay.
Hello, everybody. I wanted to say I think it's been great to see a lot of the public support towards the Eugene Police Department through this time, donating food. I've seen a lot of that from local businesses and organizations. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I think that's a great thing for the community to be doing, and it's great support for our department too. That's all.
Awesome. Lindsay, and then Alan.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Nice to see everyone. I am hanging by a thread, but I'm here. And in terms of the CRB, we haven't had any meetings since we all last met in real life. We do plan to have an agenda setting meeting and a virtual meeting next month, so there will be more to report from the CRB then. I don't have any other comments other than I appreciate that you're all here and juggling a lot of different things. And I look forward to this meeting.
Awesome. Alan, and then Silver.
Yeah, hi. Just thanks for all you people participating in the police commission and all the other stuff and hanging in there. Probably 3-4 more weeks of this at least, so hang in there some more. And actually, I was just waving at V since he was waving, so I thought I'd wave back. And I really appreciate Silver's Dodger Stadium and Terry's tropical island. I'd rather be in either place.
Awesome. Silver, and then Jennifer.
So this is the regular background that I have, but it's just my home, my kitchen wall. We do new star flakes every year, and so these will be around with us until the December time frame, and then we'll make new ones. So I'll go back to Dodger Stadium. Everything's good. We're holding up, and I'm glad that we can finally get back to meeting again. That's it.
Sweet. It's good to see you. So, Jennifer and then Terry.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad Will brought up the volunteer newsletter. I heard about that too. A small percentage of my day job is volunteer coordination, and I think she's doing a fantastic job. She's doing better than I am, so I think it's great. I appreciate like the what's up stuff, and it's great. What was my other thing I was going to say? It's gone, so I'm going to have to remember it later, but because I didn't write it down. But thank you all for being here. I know it's tough overall. I appreciate y'all finding the time to be here tonight.
Sweet. Terry, and then myself.
Hi. Good to see everybody. I'm glad to see we're all upright at this point and not stark raving mad, although I thought this meeting was last week, so perhaps. Anyway, I'm interested to hear what the chief has to say, and I don't know, may not get to that tonight, how our budget is impacted by what's been happening, in addition to the deployment of how everyone's being used. So I'm just interested in what the chief has to say about the changes that this COVID has wrought. That's it.
Yeah, I forgot to ask Sergeant Williams or Chief Skinner, do you want to add anything here?
I don't have much to add. Just thank everybody for being here. I know these are certainly kind of an unusual way to do this and more difficult. And so I appreciate you guys all making the effort to participate.
Sweet. Chief?
And I don't have anything to add right now. I'm gonna answer a couple of questions about how COVID has impacted us, and I've got those on my screen. And I'll add that question about budget and the fiscal year 21, because we just got done having our first budget committee meeting last night, so I can give you a little bit of information on that.
Sweet. And for my comment, I've heard a couple of concerns from around the community. One around the policing of prohibited camping, particularly in small parks in various neighborhoods. And Chief, your video recorded last month for us was incredibly helpful for addressing some of the concerns I've heard from folks. Not all of them, obviously, but from both sides, it's been a lot. And the other one, the other thing was I don't know if you will know this, but how the sort of citation and release and the efforts to reduce the amount of incarcerated peoples in our various jails has been affected, and if there's anything we can take forward as a positive learning opportunity from this whole crisis. That is my public comment. So we will do the COVID update as it pertains to EPD next, and then public comments. So any of our attendees, if you do want to say anything, there should be a little raise hand at the bottom of your screen if you're on a computer. I'm not sure how you do it on a phone, but feel free to raise your hand. There's an opportunity for public comment, and yeah, thank you so much. COVID-19 update. I believe we were going to, have Chief do this if I remember right. Jeremy.
Yep, I got it. So let me start by saying welcome. And if you haven't done these things, it takes a little bit of getting used to. Thursdays are my heavy day. This is my fifth one, I think, today, and so I'm a little zoomed. I'm a little Zoom fatigued right now. So I'm sorry you're not getting necessarily the best of me. As a matter of fact, speaking to a lot of the issues around homelessness, as I spent the last hour and a half on the phone with some citizens in the West Side, Jefferson West Side neighborhoods around what we're seeing on 13th Street in Tyler and kind of the fairgrounds and some of the issues there. So it's been front of mind for a lot of people about what's happening out in the community as a result of the pandemic. So let me get through a couple of the questions first and foremost, and then I'll talk a little bit about kind of the rest of what's going on. Will Davey had a question about some of the graffiti that we're seeing in the general downtown area and what maybe that's attributed to. We've seen a huge uptick in graffiti and criminal mischief since this pandemic arrived. And largely that's attributed to the fact that, we just don't have spaces activated like we did. We don't have people at businesses. We don't have pedestrians downtown. We don't have cars in parking garages. We don't have kids in school. We don't have people in parks. And so when you have an absence of human beings being present, it absolutely leaves those spaces vulnerable for criminal behavior. And unfortunately, the majority of that criminal behavior has resulted in graffiti. And so we look at that graffiti and we kind of try and analyze, okay, what is that about? And so there's a difference between graffiti and tagging. And tagging is generally gang types of graffiti meant to communicate a message to either other rival gangs or the community in what we call tagging. And those are fairly specific to gang, sects, and individuals. And so what we don't see is we don't see a lot of tagging, but we do see a lot of graffiti. And the few times that we've had some surveillance video or surveillance footage on the graffiti that we're seeing, and most of those have been footage that we've gotten from our school district partners, the vast majority of the people perpetrating that graffiti are juveniles. And so now you have no kids in school, and maybe many of those kids with zero supervision and don't have anything better to do have found their way out in our community and decided it would be a really good idea to paint, quite honestly, most of it's just nonsense on the sides of city buildings, private businesses, light poles, sidewalks, you name it. They seem to think that it's a good idea to paint it up. And so a lot of our graffiti is juvenile type crime, and a lot of it is just nonsense, as opposed to what we traditionally see as gang graffiti or gang tagging with some kind of a message around taking over a territory or something like that. And so the local gang activity is the second question from Will, and what impact do we see on property crime? So two things. We've not seen a noticeable uptick necessarily in gang activity. And when I talk about gang activity, I usually think about activity surrounding that we can tie to gangs that is involved in criminal behavior. And so we've not seen necessarily an uptick in that, but understand this area, for the size of the city that it is, does not have a significant gang issue compared to other areas that I have worked in. For instance, in Hillsborough, we had a significant gang issue, mostly Latino gangs in that particular area, and some Asian gang influence. And I'm not saying we don't have that down here. We just have not seen a huge increase in that in the local area as of yet. We do see an impact on property crimes, though, Will, in the sense that I think people engaged in survival behavior, and some would say that it's our homeless population, but I can't tell you that that's the case in every instance. I mean, we did have the one big caper up on the homeless camp at 5th and 99 after we found about $6,000 worth of stolen property from the coastal farm there. But we do see a lot of survival behavior, which then results in vehicle break-ins or what they call unauthorized entry into a motor vehicle for loose change and things that we see. I mean, all of us have been at some point maybe a victim of that type of crime. Increased probably in shoplifting, but even now is a really good time. If you're going to be a shoplifter, now's a great time to be a shoplifter, because most of these big box stores and grocery stores have kind of a no contact policy to be even extra safe. And generally speaking, they have a no contact policy if it feels like the shoplifting is under $25 in value. And so that's something we're going to have to address, because it just continues to promote shoplifting in our community. And then just general theft. And then the other crimes that we obviously pay attention to is disputes, of course, domestic violence and family violence. There's an uptick in that. The one crime that we haven't been able to memorialize or categorize that causes me the most concern is probably the amount of physical and sexual abuse that our children are subjected to that are staying home from school. There are many, many children in our community where the safest place for them to be during the day is at school. And without them having access to the mandatory reporters and those safe adults that they really trust, like teachers and counselors, we have a horrible underreporting right now of physical and sexual abuse. And so that really, really is a cause for concern, and I think is horribly underreported. So thank you for those questions, Will. Lindsay had a couple of questions, and she wanted an update on the shifts and camping ban enforcement, which I think is a great question because we've seen that. She says, it looks like we're notifying people to move today along the bike path. I'm not sure when today was, but that certainly could have been in the not so distant past, and possibly that UPD is partnering with Eric and Faye at Community Supported Shelters. First of all, let me say that Eric and Faye at CSS are fantastic partners of the city, and I really like working with Eric and on the Conestogas. The police department actually purchased 10 Conestogas from him last year with some extra year-end savings, and we're hosting unsheltered individuals in those Conestogas now around the city with some case management, trying to do our part to help out that population. The shift that we've had in the camping ban is essentially following CDC guidelines. Is we went down the path of allowing people to shelter in place and basically abandoning our prohibited camping enforcement altogether, unless we were able to anchor it to a serious health or public safety issue. And we've seen a couple of those. And so throughout this entire pandemic, the police department has actually only been involved in 2 what I would call camp closures, and one occurred at 7th over on 7th Place in front of Overhead Door due to significant health concerns and some safety concerns around no vertical curb and them camping really, really close to the roadway with no barrier. All it would take was a vehicle to veer just a little bit off the roadway across the bike lane, and it would be in a camp. And then the second one most recently was at 5th and 99, which was more anchored to community safety and the uptick in crime that we saw there. And then before that, I wouldn't call it a camp closure, but we did decide to pay attention to our neighborhood parks, which are our parks around the community that are really, really small and service individual neighborhoods mostly. And so having camping in there is just not conducive to physical distancing. And so in Monroe Park, we moved some folks, 3 or 4 campers along in Monroe Park. But there's not been a ton of camp closures. And it depends on which side of the argument you're on. Is some would tell me that that's too many closures, 2 out of the hundreds that we have, and others would tell me that that's not enough, that we should be closing and dealing with prohibited camping every single day. The piece of this that is worth mentioning and noting is the fact that when we come out of these restrictions and when we come out of whether it's end of phase 2 or end of phase 3, and we kind of try to go back to normal, is that there is still an ordinance that prohibits camping in many of the areas that people are camping. And we're going to have a fairly heavy lift to try and just unwind all the camping that has occurred. It's a significant number of people that are camping. If there was ever a moment in time you wanted to know what it looked like to rescind the prohibited camping ordinance in Eugene and not have any of those prohibitions around camping in place, it's just look around as to what's happening right now, because that's what that looks like. And so we're really, really nervous about how much work that's going to take to start enforcing our prohibited camping ban. But we do have a plan, and we do have some thoughtfulness around what we want to do. And the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to pay attention to our parks and get our parks back in shape so that people and families can use those. And we want to pay attention to our waterways. We have a significant amount of camping along the riverbanks and under our overpasses next to the river, where people are using that river as their bathrooms and their dumping site for trash, and it's just really not healthy. And so we really want to clean up those waterways. And then we'll have neighborhoods and businesses on the list asking for help out in front of their businesses or out in front of their houses that are on public right of way. So we've got a lot a lot to do there, but we have largely not enforced the camping ban or the prohibitive camping ordinance in an attempt to flatten the curve. We've all heard that, in an attempt to leave them there. What we've learned through this, though, is that our attempt to leave people in place has not been met with their ability or desire to stay in place, that we continue to see homeless camps move around the city freely, show up in different places week after week. And so they're, as much as we're using that CDC guideline to drive our practice, we are not seeing many of those camps choosing to shelter in place and do that. They're moving around quite a bit. So those are some of the questions that we've had. Just real quickly, as far as our operations are concerned, you know, you can imagine we've got all sorts of safeguards in place, whether it's personal protective equipment or social and physical distancing, both internally and externally, trying to take more phone reports, asking people to step outside on their front porch to have conversations instead of us going into their homes. We shut down very early in this thing. As you know, I think we canceled a commission meeting kind of at the last minute as this was happening in March. And we rescinded all ride-alongs, all public access to the building in an attempt to keep your first responders healthy. I really wanted to make sure we did. We shut the gym down. We really went into lockdown mode because the worst case scenario is having a bunch of cops sick and then not being able to staff the road and investigations the way we needed to. So we did the right things early. We've loosened a few of those things up. Most recently, I've loosened some minor restrictions on the gym so that people could feel like they could get some exercise, recognizing that our mental health was being tied to our physical health in a very stressful job and needing to do some things like that. So I'm trying to be mindful about those types of things as well. But you have a healthy police department that's showing up every day. The road is staffed well, patrol is staffed well. Investigators are mostly working from home unless they're out in the field trying to do some interviews that they need to do. And most of the administrative staff, if not all of the administrative staff, is working remotely right now, to include the command staff, with very few times that we're in the office. And when we are, it's either in our own offices or physically distanced if we need to be in a meeting where we're face to face. So that's kind of an update on where we're at in COVID-19 and what's going on. And we're getting ready to gear up for the phase 1 opening tomorrow. And I think that'll feel good for people, but we're paying attention to what that means for as people are getting out and about. More people will be out and about than ever over the next couple of weeks, which means more people will see what's going on out and about. And I think in some cases, they're going to be shocked at what they see around the number of unsheltered individuals that are out on our streets and open spaces. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Sean.
So I haven't seen anybody raise their hand. Please feel free to add your hand to the stack. So I'll have Alan and then Lindsay and then myself.
Yeah, Chief, thanks for that report. The child and sexual abuse statistic wasn't fun to hear. But overall, what's your thoughts about, or what the statistics show about crime in it overall? Is petty crime up? What about violent crime? What about other kinds of things? DWIs is probably way down.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you one of the things that's been, speaking of DUIs and driving, I will tell you one of the things that's a huge uptick for us right now is the amount of erratic and crazy driving that's occurring. When you have fewer people on the road, it has given people the room and the space to move. Give you an example. We had one of the motors 2 weeks ago wrote a citation for 42 miles an hour over the speed limit going over the Ferry Street Bridge. And then we had over 40 over the speed limit going westbound on 6th Street past the Graduate. And so speeding has been crazy for us. We've only seen maybe a 2 or 3% drop in total calls for service. And that's been offset with more proactive activity on our part, because we're trying to stop more people and educate more people and being able to do that. There's been an uptick in the property crimes. There's been an uptick in our, what we call our societal crimes or livability crimes, but our violent crimes don't seem to be up, which is good. And we do have a slight uptick in domestic violence, and that's very, very that makes a lot of sense. That's something that we could have foreseen. Anytime we have families that maybe don't have great coping mechanisms stuck inside together for that long, we see that. And anecdotally, I think we've got a large increase in I'll just put it this way: self-medication. We've got a lot of people. We've got a lot of people that are sitting at home doing, vape drinking, trying to cope with this thing. And usually, when you mix alcohol and family conflict, it's not a good outcome. So that would be what I would say we're seeing the most of.
Yeah, I'll bear witness to the crazy drivers. Geez, when I've been out there, people have been zooming around me. It's just nuts what's going on. I think I saw that guy on Ferry Street Bridge.
We've got Lindsay next.
So forgive my lack of knowledge about this topic. So is enforcement or lack of enforcement of the camping ban tied to the state of emergency, either the state or the county state of emergency, or is it tied to something else? Like, I guess, what triggers reinforcing the camping ban more consistently?
So it's not specifically tied to the state of emergency, but it is specifically tied to the governor's order around stay home, stay safe, or stay home, save lives. So part of that stay home executive order basically triggered kind of the CDC guidelines on what that looks like and flattening the curve. And we as a city decided to heed the governor's order of staying home, and homes for those people are their shelters wherever they happen to be, and asking them to shelter in place. And it's not fair unless they're on the radar screen for something like criminal behavior or really, really unsanitary or unhealthy reasons. It's not fair to just move them around, because then we just keep moving them around, and it's contrary to what the governor is asking us to do around staying home. And so it's more anchored to that. The state of emergency here locally in the county and for the city is more anchored around our ability to handle this crisis and be eligible for FEMA reimbursement for the types of costs that we're shelling out to deal with the COVID response.
So when the camping ban is going to be enforced more evenly again, what kind of notice, like I'm assuming you have a plan with like a period of notification, et cetera. I'm just kind of wondering what that might look like, and if you have any kind of projection about when that might be coming down.
Yeah, I think that we probably are not going to get to that until sometime maybe in phase 2. Now, remember, we start phase 1 on Friday. We've got 21 days. We have to exist in that space. Phase 2 is not going to happen until the first week or second week of June. My guess would be it would be after phase 2 and in phase 3, where we're really lifting restrictions and allowing people to move about the city freely. And then when that happens, we'll have some policy discussions and policy decisions to make. Is, do we go back to enforcing our prohibitive camping ordinance the way we always have? And if that's the case, what kind of outreach and what kind of education do we need to do before we just go out and do it, and allow people to understand that they're not doing it? We're working on kind of a one-page document right now with a couple of different advocates: Wayne Martin, Lori Haber, Tom Cook, and Heather. I don't remember Heather's last name from Whitebird, but we're working on a kind of one-page document that basically says, here's the code of conduct for your camp. So while we have the stay home, shelter in place type thing, here's the code of conduct for your camp that keeps you basically off the radar screen. Here's the things you need to do to make sure that you don't get contacted by police or public works about what's going on. And it outlines right out front that basically what's existing right now is still technically prohibited in Eugene. And so council will have to have a discussion about whether or not they want to change that prohibition. And then we'll be really, really measured about how we do this. And I'll just be honest with you, Lindsay, I don't have the resources to attack this in a very robust fashion. It's going to have to be really, it's going to compete with everything else we're trying to do in this community. But I also know that we've got a tremendous number of neighborhoods and business leaders that are struggling with the amount of camping that's occurring in and around their homes and businesses. And so we'll have to be thoughtful about how we do this thoughtfully, slowly, but evenly and equitably throughout the city.
Thank you.
You bet.
So I've got myself. If anybody else wants to say anything, go ahead and raise your hands. I was wondering if we've had any instances of exposure to COVID, and if what sort of quarantine procedures we have for that.
Yeah, we so here's the tough part about being a cop during COVID is we've got personal protective equipment, and our men and women are using PPE where it seems appropriate. We don't have the luxury sometimes of taking what we call the tactical pause to be able to put the PPE on before we're dealing with somebody. Sometimes we show up, and the next thing you know, it's kind of game on for us, and we have to just deal with it. And we work in a profession that we are asking our police officers to use their words to resolve situations and communicate clearly with people and get compliance. And mostly we're very, very good at that. And now you throw a mask on us and it makes it even more difficult. And you throw a mask on other people and it makes it even more difficult to hear them. That became clear to me. I did a couple of in-person interviews last week, and trying to do those just with a reporter that was 6 or 8 feet away was difficult at best to understand. But they're doing the best they can to do that. We've had a couple of what we thought were exposures. Now, again, remembering the true term from a CDC of an exposure is contact with an individual for an hour or more within 6 feet that is tested or is known to have COVID. That's technically what an exposure is. We obviously will be within 6 feet. Obviously, don't know if they have COVID or not, but very unlikely are we there for more than an hour in close proximity with somebody. So it's not common for us to have a real high risk exposure, but we've had a couple instances where we've sent some people home for 14 days to check symptoms. And we've had 1 or 2 instances where we've had a police officer tested and both have come back negative. So we've not been impacted, at least from a medical perspective, have not been impacted by the COVID virus at all within EPD.
Sweet. Thank you. Do we have any more questions before we move on to the next public comments? Seeing none, if you are an attendee, I'll give you 30 seconds to raise your hand if you haven't already. Jeremy, are you seeing anybody who's...
No one as of yet. We do have 4 attendees and no one has raised their hand.
Yeah, I know 2 of them are from the auditor's office. I know Barbara. I don't know the phone number, so seeing none. If you do have any questions or concerns, please have them sent to the commission. We can get to them next time, enter them in and read them out. I did have somebody on Facebook reach out to me asking about the incarceration and the release of folks in order to minimize the prison population, which I'm hoping the chief can touch on in the chief's report coming up right here.
Okay, well, way to tee that up. Nice work there. Yeah, let me just address that. And Sean, seriously, if somebody ends up raising their hand while I'm talking, just interrupt me, especially if it's something I can answer for people. Just don't be bashful about interrupting me and saying, hey, we've got a question. And I'll try and get through a couple of thoughts I have. So working with the Lane County Jail, we've been really, really careful about making sure that we minimize the number of bodies we're taking into the jail and putting in that population. So we're trying not to enforce less in our community. We're just trying to enforce it a little bit differently with cite and release instead of custody. Now, after I say that, we have incidents where people need to be taken into custody and taken to jail, and we're still doing that, but we're trying to have really good discernment around what can we handle with just a citation in the field with a court date into the future and not take anybody to jail. The majority of what we do now are violent crimes that we're dealing with. Those are jailable, and we're taking people to jail. The ones that are being booked through state statute into circuit court are going to jail and being lodged for the right reasons there. The majority of the work we do, as we know, is misdemeanor crime. That's what plagues this community, is the low-level misdemeanor crime. And those are all municipal court types of crime. And we only have 15 beds at the Lane County Jail for misdemeanor municipal court crime. So there's not a huge population of those folks. And it's, as a matter of fact, if we're ever going to do anything different in this community, we have to think about increasing that number of 15. I'm not suggesting at all that jailing people is the way that we create a crime-free community, but I think we can all recognize that for a city of 170,000 people, having 15 beds for misdemeanor crime is horribly understaffed for us as far as inventory of jail beds. But we are doing our part, and we've been working closely with the sheriff's office, and they're doing a good job of keeping that jail population. I think the last email that I saw, the jail population was at about 60 to 63% of normal. And they feel like that is kind of the sweet spot for them on how they can kind of keep people separated and still maintain some continuity of operations. And so we're going down that path. And so we'll see what that looks like as we come out of this, whether that's the kind of the new normal for a while, because we want to be mindful that the minute we come out of this, we're going to be heading into a fall and potentially early winter season where we may have another round of the virus. And so we don't want to ramp back up. We don't want to ramp back up and then have to shut everything down. So that might be a little bit measured on how we do that.
Can you talk a little bit more about the patterns of who is cited and released versus the people who are kept? I heard violent crimes.
Yeah. So when we respond to, for instance, there's certain crimes that we can't cite and release. Like if we go to a domestic and develop probable cause, that person goes to jail, and that's by statute. So we have a few statutory obligations to actually arrest people and take them physically into custody and do that. Most of the crimes that we are citing in lieu of are theft crimes, are criminal mischief, trespass, disorderly conduct, all of those crimes that we have, those are mostly cite in lieu of custody, and reserving our custody time for things like our serious crimes, like our burglaries or home evasion burglaries, robberies, significant assaults, domestic, those types of things that we continue to deal with. Those will be arrestable, and we will take somebody in custody and physically remove them and lodge them in jail. And in some cases, they get booked and released. But it's in order to diffuse the situation and create some separation in a really, really bad situation, it's our obligation to physically take custody of them and remove them. And so that's kind of an example of the two sides of that. You want me to just keep going?
Yeah, by all means.
All right, let's do this. So Chief's report, anytime I give you a Chief's report, it's kind of more on a 30,000-foot view of where we're at. We're dangerously close to, we're a couple of meetings away, I guess, so maybe dangerously close is not the right word. We're a few meetings away from landing a fiscal year 21 budget. The budget is largely status quo with a proposed $750,000 reduction in the general fund, just to be a little bit careful and thoughtful as we look at what the economics look like of this particular time and what our financial picture looks like. And so that'll be the little bit of a different. Each one of us as division leaders have taken a $125,000 hit. And we'll find a way to absorb that, or to not do some things, or not spend some money to be able to do that within our budgets. And then, but largely the FY21 budget is intact, and we're going to be able to have no disruption of services at all in our general fund. And so I'm very, very pleased about that. I think FY21 is actually fairly solid. I think the out years are the ones we're more worried about, FY22 and FY23, as we look at unemployment rates, property tax collection, those kinds of things. So we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. The other piece for us is the CSI, the Community Safety Initiative, that we're in right now. If you remember, you know, the street crimes unit, the extra CSOs, the extra dispatchers that we have as a part of the organization now are on a bridge funding that is basically a loan against the general fund to be paid back by Community Safety Initiative payroll tax. And so what we're doing is we're shrinking that a little bit in the sense that we're just going to stay put with the original bridge strategy, which is about $6 million worth of ongoing money for all the people that we've hired and other departments have hired, homeless services, municipal court, prosecutor's office, all of those things. And so we're gonna shrink that back to that number and just keep that continuity of services through FY21. And we're still scheduled to start collecting payroll tax in January of 2021. And as we get closer to that, we'll be doing a lot of outreach and a lot of analysis around what we think the revenue projections might be, because there's two metrics that affect that. Number one is the success in collecting the tax. So the percentage of individuals and businesses we're actually getting payments from. And number two, the available payroll in Lane County or in Eugene, which when we originally did our projections months and months and months ago, were about $7.9 billion worth of total payroll. We know that has shrunk considerably because of unemployment. And so we're going to be careful about the analysis on what we can do. And then based on what we think we're going to be able to collect, that will drive how quickly we ramp up the Community Safety Initiative. First and foremost, we'll stabilize where we're at in bridge funding and pay that loan back to the general fund and the fleet fund. And then based on what kind of what the collections look like, we'll start having a kind of a good strategy on when we hire more officers or dispatchers or CSOs or whatever it is. And so we'll do that. So I feel very, very comfortable that we've got a good game plan for that. And we have the right people that are looking at administering that tax. But it's definitely threw a wrench in the program by having the COVID-19 happen this spring, is because it's just a lot of uncertainty. But I am very, very proud of the city, and I'm proud of the leadership and proud of this council so far with respect to this budget and saying, hey, there's a lot we don't know. So let's just be careful about what we do. Let's take a few small steps to just safeguard our budget strategy without overreacting and just completely going nuts on this budget and start slashing services. And so I really am feeling very, very blessed to have the type of leadership we have in this city, both our electeds and our interim city managers doing a fantastic job leading us through this. I couldn't be prouder and more excited to work for somebody than if Sarah Maderi ends up being our city manager. And that's a shameless plug with our two counselors that are sitting on this call. So, but the police department's doing really good. They're healthy, they're engaged, they're doing things differently, like I said before, but they are handling their calls for service. I'd like to be able to tell you that they've had time on their hands because our calls for service have gone down, but that's not the case. Our calls for service are as robust as they've always been, which is unfortunate. Many other cities have seen a decline in calls for service, which has then freed up their proactivity time or their relational time with the community. We just haven't been the beneficiaries of that as of yet. So I don't think that's going to happen until we create more capacity in this police department to handle our calls for service. And I know we've talked about that ad nauseum. We are still we're in a hiring pause right now, not a hiring freeze, but a hiring pause, which is not bad for the police department because we are fully staffed and have been fully staffed for a number of months now. Almost a year now, off and on, we've been fully staffed. And so it's a good time for us to be in a pause because we don't have any positions to hire anyway. And any positions we do have open right now are in the professional staff ranks, like in records and what we call in community engagement team, which is like our crime prevention specialists. And we'll be able to fill those kind of onesie twosie over the course of the next fiscal year. And the commitment is that we as an executive team talk about filling those positions before we just actually fill them, just trying to be mindful of general fund budget.
How has COVID affected the training of the new officers?
Yeah, that's a great
Getting
question.
up time.
You're doing a great job moderating this, by the way. That's a great question because we had 4 officers sent back to us from the academy. They had been there 1 week and then they got sent home to us. So I've got those 4 headed to the academy, and including them, I got a total of 15 that need to get to the academy. And so we're seeing this week for the first time a group of officers that were 4 weeks away from graduating actually being brought back to the academy to finish. And then they're and then they're going to bring another group back that was about 8 weeks away from finishing. So we're starting to see the academy open up a little bit, and I'm waiting to see the first pass at the schedule for the upcoming academy dates and classes, and we'll get those in there. We've had to completely change the way we train these kids because, you know, usually when I hire baby cops, they do orientation with us and they do about 3 weeks with us, and then we ship them off to the academy. And now we've got brand new baby cops with us that'll be with us for months. And so we've had to think a little bit differently on how we're going to train them and what we're going to allow them to do with our FTOs, our field training officers, before we actually get them to an academy date. And then, of course, overarching for our training above all of this is looking at what the state budget's going to do. When you think about billions and billions of dollars of shortfall, part of one of the state agencies is the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training. And oftentimes they are required to take a cut. And when they take a cut, that means fewer classes. And with fewer classes, it means it's more competitive to get officers in those classes. The good news is we've got a great relationship with the director up there. And there's 2 agencies in the state that he calls first when he's trying to get projection on how many classes to fill. And the first one is Portland Police Bureau for obvious reasons. And the second one is Eugene Police Department because of what we've been doing. I had my 2-year anniversary last month here, and we were counting up. And in 2 years that I've been here, I've hired over 60 brand new police officers and 35 professional staff. We've hired 95 new people in the last 2 years here at the police department. And so, you know, that hiring will continue into the future. With regards to the community safety initiative. So let me stop there and see if maybe there's any other questions I can answer from anybody so that we can just kind of either stay on time or finish early if that's what you'd like to do.
I am not seeing anybody raising their hands, which I think means we are ready to move on to the canine unless you want to say anything. Any last words?
Nope, I'm good. I appreciate everything you do. I appreciate the thoughtfulness around wanting to make us the very best we can be. I'll look forward to when we can kind of get in a room together and get back and roll our sleeves up and dig into some substance around policy. That'll be a nice change.
Sweet. All right, Canine Policy 904. Sergeant Williams, take it away.
Hey everybody. The last 7 or 8 minutes of the Chiefs talking, I feel like my internet connection may have been a little less stable. So if I'm heading in or out, just let me know and I'll see if I can go turn off some other devices or something around the house, see if it's my end or not. So let me know. So the canine program obviously kind of goes back a ways from where we had had the canine team come out. And so this policy actually was not too out of date, and we actually really didn't have any changes within it other than including the narcotics detection portion. And I do think though that this is an important piece for the commission to take a look at because it is kind of an unusual bit. Primarily, if we go down to the last section, and that's going to be in continued training, section E, and it's highlighted down there. This is about the only place where we can be allowed to actually legally possess illegal substances. And so I think it is important that we get your input on looking at and being supportive of that kind of unusual piece. And then 904.8 controlled substance procedures. Obviously, there's a whole set of things that we need to do to maintain and track that. And so those were the most important pieces of this policy for review today. And there's a lot more above it though. So I'll just pause for just a minute and see if anyone has any questions leading up to that point. And so I'm going to kind of just briefly scroll through. I won't read anything. Most of it is all pretty standard language. The bulk of this policy language came from Tigard police departments.
I have Lindsay with a question as well.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I can always wait until you're like at a breaking point, sorry.
No, go for it.
But I had a question about 904.2.3, the narcotics detection as a first highlighted section. So it talks about that the canine trained in narcotics it gives examples like sniff vehicles, buildings, bags, etc. And it has this like kind of vague with current laws under certain circumstances, including. And I guess I was wondering, my main question when I read through that was, are the dogs, is there a restriction about needing to have probable cause before a dog can be used to sniff, or like when can a dog just be like roaming around sniffing for things? I'm sure there's rules, but I don't know what they are. And so I'd love some more clarification about what would trigger a dog to be used to sniff for narcotics, or if it's going to be used in a place like the Eugene airport where you're generally trying to screen a large population without any particular probable cause. Anyway, I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, and that the chief might be able to provide a little bit of info on that. I'm not sure if his previous agency had a narcotics dog or not. I have to be honest, I am not the expert on the case law and whatnot surrounding when and how the dog can be used. The nice thing about narcotics dogs is that they have been in service for a long time, and there's a lot of relevant case law that articulates when and how and whatnot. Unfortunately, I am not the expert on it, and I couldn't tell you. So that certainly is a piece that we could do some follow-up on and get a little more, try to get an abridged version of that. I would imagine it's a fairly complicated piece of search and seizure law, and I'm just not familiar with it. So
yeah, just real quick, a couple of incidents there. So the answer to your question, Lindsay, is both. Is we can write a search warrant. We can write a search warrant for narcotics based on probable cause for a variety of reasons, and we can bring the dog in underneath that search warrant into your home or place of business or your vehicle and be able to utilize the dog's detection abilities under the umbrella of a search warrant. And that's one way we use the dog. And quite honestly, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, that's how the dog would be used. For instance, street crimes gets a tip, they do an investigation, they get a controlled buy, they do surveillance, they develop probable cause, they write a search warrant, it's signed by a judge, and then the dog is used underneath that search warrant. There also is the opportunity to do what's called open air sniffs. So there's no expectation of privacy for people that are out in public that we have to worry about with the dog with respect to a dog alerting on the detection of narcotics. Now, having said that, the dog sniff is just one piece that would give us probable cause to be able to actually do a search if we got that. It's not the only piece for probable cause. So if I walked a dog down the street and there's a bunch of people standing around, the dog alerts on one person, we're not, patting that person down saying, oh, you've got drugs because the dog said that, or dog detected that. So, but it is legal to do open air sniffs and to use that as probable cause. But our intent with these dogs is to have them operate under the premise of having a search warrant before we utilize their expertise.
Great, thank you. That's helpful.
Thanks, Chief. Go ahead, Will.
I just wonder whether all the dogs are trained in narcotics detection or only some.
Yeah, no, we do not have cross-trained dogs. So we will have one dog that is specifically trained in narcotics, and the other dogs are the people. Yeah, people
Well, I've
tracking.
got you. What about explosives trained dogs? Do we have any of those?
We don't. We did many years ago. We haven't had one for a long time. The
Okay.
University of Oregon has one. I think they have one explosive detection, and then DHS, Homeland Security, has a dog that's based out of Eugene, and our explosives team coordinates and works with him a lot. He's a great guy to work with.
Thank you.
And then Matt, did I see your hand earlier, or were you adjusting your camera?
I was just adjusting the camera.
Okay.
So yeah, so the narcotics detection portion there is certainly not designed to be inclusive from a search and seizure standpoint, but more of a generalized list of times and when and how the dog can be used, because it's a complicated, it would be a much larger portion if we were trying to include all the nuances of case law in there. So that's a great question, and I'm sorry that I didn't have a better answer for you. Any other questions about that section about when and kind of how the dogs would be used, can be used? Okay.
Doesn't look like it.
And then the rest of it's pretty clear until we get down to. So we have all this kind of list off the section titles. Guidelines for non-apprehension, reporting canine use bites and injuries, reporting canine injuries, assignment of canines, interaction with canines by other personnel, request for use of canine teams, call out off-duty canine teams, request for public demonstrations. That's certainly one that we do a lot. The canine team is one of those fun, flashy, certainly entertaining pieces, and they do a lot of public demonstration work. Selection of handlers. Handler responsibilities. That's a unique and full-time job. They are truly responsible for those dogs 24/7, and there's a lot of coordinating and covering each other when they're out of town for other training or on vacation or whatever. And there is a lot of responsibility there. The canine job is one that would be a lot of fun and certainly something I'd be interested in, but I don't know that I have the time and energy to put into the amount of work that job really is. So I've got a lot of respect for what they do. Canines in public areas, medical care, training. Obviously, training's a big piece, and making sure that all the dogs and handlers have trained, passed their certifications. Go ahead, Will.
This is just a curiosity. I wonder if there's like an assigned EPD vet, or whether each dog perhaps has its own vet, or how that works. Do you know?
Boy, that's a great question. I have no idea.
It's sort of interesting.
I would assume that we have a general vet's office that all the dogs go to.
Okay.
But yeah, I have no idea.
Okay.
Our teams are certified by the Oregon Police Canine Association currently, and they do a lot of training, ongoing with their initial certification and then ongoing. So then we've added a section here under continued training, section E, and that's where we talk about officers acting in the performance of their official duties may possess or transfer controlled substances for the purposes of narcotics detection canine training in compliance with state and federal laws. The chief of police or designee may authorize a member to seek controlled substance evidence and or related paraphernalia related to an adjudicated case and allow the controlled substances and or related paraphernalia to be possessed by the member or a narcotics detection canine handler or training who is working under the direction of this department for training purposes. And that sentence is a little weird. The handler or slash training, I need to tune that up just a little bit. As an alternative, the chief of police or designee may request narcotics training aids from the Drug Enforcement Agency. My understanding is that we will not generally be going that route, but leaving the options open. We certainly bring in enough drug evidence that we'll be able to manage this in-house, and that simplifies a lot of processes. Yeah, Lindsay.
So I'm assuming that the narcotics or paraphernalia would be coming from property and evidence, would be used for training purposes, and then would be returned to property and evidence division. Is that the part of the police department that would be sort of monitoring the dispensing of the items and then the cataloging of their return?
Yeah, so the drug evidence that's used will only be evidence that's from an adjudicated case. So rather than sending that drug evidence to be destroyed, that evidence would be pulled over to be used as a training aid. It is not checked out and returned every training day. It's checked out and assigned to the handler. And that's listed under 904.8 has a pretty specific description of kind of how that works. So the drugs are weighed, recorded, I'll just read through that section. Due to the responsibilities and liabilities involved with possessing readily usable amounts of controlled substances and the ever-present danger of the canine's accidental ingestion, the following procedures will be strictly followed. All controlled substances training samples shall be weighed and tested prior to dispensing to the individual canine handler or trainer. The weight and test results shall be recorded and maintained by the department. Any person possessing controlled substance training sample shall maintain custody and control of the controlled substance and shall keep records regarding any loss of or damage to those controlled substances. These officers are regularly training throughout their shifts and throughout the weeks. They're doing demonstrations where they're using these substances as parts of their demonstrations. And so it would place a significant burden if they were having to go back and forth and check them out. So they'll be issued to them, it'll be maintained, but it'll be well logged and controlled on what they have and the weights of what they have. And it's their responsibility to maintain that. On an annual basis, all controlled substance training samples will be replaced. All controlled substance training samples will be inspected and weighed frequently and on random occasions at the discretion of the unit coordinator. Inspections of training aids will be documented in the handler's maintenance and training log. So periodic and random inspections by the supervisor to ensure that all the samples are there as they should be. Stored in a locked, airtight, watertight case at all times except during training. So again, maintaining the safety and security of those substances. Secured in the trunk of the canine handler's assigned patrol vehicle during transport and stored in an appropriate locked container. No exceptions to this procedure. The canine coordinator shall periodically inspect every controlled substance training sample for damage or tampering and take any appropriate action. Any unusable controlled substance training sample shall be returned to the Property and Evidence Division or the dispensing agency. Return training samples will be weighed. So again, trying to give enough discretion that the person working with the dog has the ability to do training at any time, but also trying to cover our bases that that there's checks and balances to that. And these are this language is pretty standard for teams doing this sort of thing. So we didn't make up those processes. That's has been tried and tested in other places as well. The only other piece from just up above was there is apparently synthetic substances that can be used that are commercially available, and I'm not real familiar with those, and I haven't heard any discussion that that's a real viable option for us. And so it's in there because it's possible, but again, it's not likely that we'll be using those. Any thoughts or concerns about the controlled substance procedures? Does that all seem reasonable?
That seems reasonable to me. Do we want to, I'm not seeing any other questions. Do we want to have a motion to accept, or is there another round you want to go through with this?
Just real quick,
No, that's-
Kyle, right before controlled substance procedures, training records is 381 7.3? 0.7.3? Is there
Yeah.
a reason it's a 381?
Oh, that's funny.
That just might be the, weird, it needs to just be a change.
Yeah,
I
I wonder.
guess.
I wonder if that's from before we did the
An old
transition. We renumbered a bunch of stuff, and that one might have been missed. Thanks, Terry.
Sure.
Yes, and I know the team is excited to have this in place and the new policy set. So I would ask that we move a motion forward to accept, unless there's any other concerns.
I guess I just had one other question. So if I'm understanding correctly, it would be the supervisor of the K9 unit who would then be doing the random checks and inspections of the narcotics that have been checked out. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Are there other departments or other research that you've done that shows it's better to have it outside of the chain of command of that division for transparency's sake, or just a cross check?
Can I jump in here real quick?
You bet.
So I don't have the policy in front of me, Kyle, but it seems like much like what we do in evidence control unit, we have a specific individual that's in the chief's office that is the quality control person that does random audits of our ECU, drugs, guns.
So Sean, are we at the motion stage?
Right after the chief finishes speaking.
I can't hear him.
That's okay. But so we have a quality control individual that does this in ECU. It seems like maybe this is a good fit to Lindsay's point, and I totally agree with her. It's the whole fox watching the hen house mentality, is we might want to lump in the quality control individual, which in this case is Lisa Magnus, that would do either audits quarterly or a couple times a year or something like that, just as a thought.
I'm certainly not opposed to that in the least.
Yeah, thanks for answering that question. And I don't mean to cast aspersions or anything. It just, it wasn't, the other thing in that part of the policy, it's not clear where the stuff comes from. It doesn't say at the beginning of the policy, we'll check out from evidence. It says it'll be materials from a case that's already been adjudicated. And so for all of you, that's probably super clear, who has that stuff. But if whoever you get them from is also the one who's doing the checking, that seems sort of logical. And then anything that's unused and undamaged goes back anyway.
So there is kind of two parts to that. So when the canine officer actually checks out the substances and weighs it and logs it, and it's dispersed to them, that's a totally different area. That is the evidence control unit, and they're going to be the ones that are going to be issuing it to them and
okay,
and making that and logging that. So then the periodic checks throughout the year are going to be the direct supervisor that's going to be able to double check that back to the original checkout, essentially. And then annually, when everything's turned over, then everything's compared side by side at that point too. So it isn't just, so there are kind of two layers of checking there, that the supervisor is essentially just comparing the substances throughout the year, but then, well, yeah, I guess I'm just saying it over again. But then annually, there's going to be a full review that would compare what was given to him a year before. So it isn't Yeah, it isn't like they just go to a box and he and the sergeant get to pick out what they want, and then the sergeant's then continuing to check on what's there.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So if it was a little bit more clear where they were getting the stuff to start with, like I think just calling out what you already know and already assume, being someone who works there. But then I think I also like what the chief said about considering not having it be the direct supervisor of the person who has the narcotics checked out being a cross check. That makes me feel more comfortable, but that's obviously your call. That's just my 2 cents.
I like adding some language of this person or this person. So
I thought it was an
whoever
and.
needs to can do
But
it.
it was both.
But let's take this, run it through for Scrivener's errors and some of this last clarity stuff, and bring it back next time for just a final read through.
Okay.
It does say, by the way, it does say on here, Lindsay, that in H, under controlled substance procedures, it does say it will be returned to the Property and Evidence Division or the dispensing agency.
Right. It just doesn't say.
Right. It
It'll
doesn't say
be
that's where
returned
they're
there. It
giving
doesn't say where it came from there,
Right.
which is obvious, but it just doesn't say it.
Right.
Well, and it is possible that it could come from our evidence control or state police evidence control. I mean, I think there are other places. So where the materials come from is a little bit fluid, but we can see if we can wordsmith something in that makes that a little more clear.
Thanks for humoring me.
Of course.
Sweet.
I'm going to take a note on that real quick.
Yeah, let's say, I would entertain a motion to pass this along, provided those clarifications are made.
I think we'd still have to look on look at the changes and vote with the changes. I mean, procedurally, okay. I think. I don't know.
That might be a question for Jeremy, or we can look at it next time.
I think procedurally, I think it's kind of up to you how you want to move. If you want to bring it back next time, it's easy enough to do.
All right, let's just bring it back next time. Hopefully everybody who's part of this conversation will be there and satisfied next time. And we can move on to the next topic in here on the agenda, which is the traffic enforcement procedure.
Get that pulled up here just a second. So this one was actually quite old, and that's primarily why it came under review was just due to age, and trying to bring our very old policies up to a more recent review. And so we really actually don't have much to change here, but traffic enforcement and traffic laws is something that most everybody is passionate about one way or the other. They don't like it when they get it, but they're angry at everybody else who do violate the traffic laws. And one thing that's interesting in this is like under section 6.2.2A1, so right in the front page, responsibilities and procedures. The goal of your action is to educate the violator in an effort to obtain voluntary compliance with traffic laws and ordinances. And I like that it sets the tone that there really is. It's not just your job is to go write traffic tickets. And officers ultimately have the discretion to make the decision on a case-by-case basis on how they handle traffic, generally speaking. At the same time, it's pretty prescriptive about what the department expects, generally speaking, absent other circumstances, about how we would like these things to be handled. And I think that's important to just sort of help set the stage for what that expectation is. And so I felt like this was more informative for the commission, because I think this is one that probably most people have never seen. Even if you scrolled through the
Yeah.
policy manual, that's probably doesn't peg as being one that you popped open and took a look at. It's not flashy and fun, or super controversial. And so I just figured it would be a good opportunity to get your eyes on it, see if there was any feedback on any parts of it. There are 2 sections that we did make some adjustments to, and that was more to just come into line with where municipal code is and the traffic code. So the first is the go ahead, Will.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry. But
I thought you were waiting.
Well,
Yeah.
I did. Okay, I did raise my hand. I just didn't mean to interrupt. I noticed that there's nothing about insurance now.
Yeah. So the reason that the insurance section was in there before was because we could cite somebody for driving uninsured.
Yeah.
And we could cite them for that if either A, they didn't have insurance, or B, if they couldn't prove insurance. So they might have had insurance, but since they couldn't prove it, we would still cite them. We could still cite them for driving uninsured. And then as soon as they went to the court and they showed the court that they had proof of insurance, then the charge would get dropped. We also do have a violation for failure to provide proof of insurance, which before, if you didn't have proof of insurance on that day, you didn't have proof of insurance on that day, and a ticket was a ticket. What they didn't like was the municipal court didn't like that it took some discretion away from them. And so the language essentially says, generally you will cite for driving uninsured in all cases because they wanted the judges to have some discretion. While the ORS 806.012 has been changed now, and even if we cite for driving without failure to provide proof of insurance and they didn't show proof of insurance, as long as they show up at the courts with proof of insurance, it still gets dropped. And so the reasoning behind why we gave some explanation about how you should handle a no insurance has really gone away, because it doesn't matter how you cite them. If they had insurance on the day, whether they had their card or not, the ticket's going to get dropped regardless. They're not even going to go see a judge. The clerks out front are going to drop it.
Okay. But canceling this out doesn't mean officers don't check for insurance.
No. No, it's only that we've just taken away that guidance about how and when to cite for one or the other.
Got it. Thank you.
And it took some chewing on it, and the traffic supervisor Sean Marsh and I reviewed ORS and talked it through and just decided that it seemed cleaner to just take it out, because really the reason that it was there was no longer based on ORS and in the municipal court.
Thank you.
I think I saw more.
Yeah, I had V next.
Hi, Sergeant Williams. I'm looking at the policy and I'm not seeing anything about body cams. Are the traffic officers supposed to activate body cams when they engage, the public?
So, yeah, but that's going to be covered under the body-worn video policy. So that really wouldn't be discussed here, because that's an expectation for our patrol officers as well as our traffic officers, that body cams are utilized, and so we would contain all of that within that other policy.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Anybody else? So I'll come back up to the other change. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Sorry, I was just going to say my favorite part about this policy was that first thing that you pointed out. I think it is important that it sets a tone that the point is educational and to get voluntary compliance. And I like that that was right up front, and I smiled when I read it. So anyway, thanks for that.
Good. So the only other section that we changed is the excessive speed. It's a little bit unusual. ORS does allow for us to double bail amounts for construction in school zones. The municipal court doesn't follow that guideline. And while we do cite for Oregon Revised Statute numbers, they're actually municipal court. If we cite into Muni Court, the Muni Court has adopted the Oregon Traffic Code as their own code, but we still have to follow Muni Court's rules on how they want to handle things. And the municipal court hasn't adopted the doubling the fines piece. So that was just a little bit outdated. And so that's why that has been changed. And so the municipal court does ask that we add the $75 fee, but it doesn't double the citation. Now, if you cite into circuit court specifically, then the fine can be doubled. So it's a difference in the way the courts handle it, which is why I specify in there, when citing a work or school zone violation into Eugene Municipal Court, do not double. And then always make a note on the citation that it was a school zone with children or with workers present, so that the judges know that when they're entering it. And then they basically go on a different, they don't make a reduction in the bail amount because of the workers or children being present. And so there is some different ways that they handle it, which is why we needed to call that out. I think I saw V's hand.
I was going to say.
Thanks. So I'm looking at this policy, and it seems like there's a lot of discretion for the officers to, lean one way or the other. Am I correct with that? And if so, are there any studies within the department to see, if there are more citations issued to a certain ethnic groups or gender, age, or anything like that? Is there any sign of that? Because, with discretions, it's very easy for people to be biased, first of all, and we're all humans. So I'm just wondering if there's any concerns within the department about that.
So let me jump in here, because that's, you're speaking my love language here, V. I love the fact that you brought that up, because what this is about both our explicit and implicit bias in the way we police. And the one way that shows up is not necessarily what calls for service we go to, but what we do with our discretionary time, who we stop, whether they're on a bicycle or in a car, or who we stop walking down the street with our discretionary time, because it's based on our decisions as police officers. So to answer your question, the answer is yes. First of all, I'll tell you that as I look at our stops data, both subject and traffic stops, mostly traffic stops, our citation to warning ratio is very, very healthy. I think the last time I checked, it was about a 1/3 citation rate to a 2/3 warning rate, which is important for me, understanding that when I got here, it was called the TEU, Traffic Enforcement Unit, which is our motors. And I changed it to Traffic Safety Unit, because we have a different mission with that group. Enforcement is not everything we do. We want to promote safety and education as well. And so they do that. And maybe more pointedly is that fact that we are mandated by the state to record every stop we make, and to the best of our ability, without trying to guess, memorialize the reason for the stop, the ethnicity and gender of the person that we stopped, and whether or not a search or arrest was made. And the Eugene Police Department is one of the few agencies in the state that gets high marks for not only a 99-point-something% compliance rate with reporting these numbers, but how quickly we got on board with reporting these numbers, and we do that, and the officers do that. And so I'm pretty proud of that. And there's been the first round of what we call the stops data statewide has just come out with their annual report and recommendations. And the Eugene Police Department had very, very good remarks with respect to the number of stops we're making compared to the ethnicity of our population that we're dealing with. And so we're very, very healthy. There's no indicator that there's disparate treatment right now based on that officer's discretionary activity. So thanks for that question. I thought that was fantastic.
So those are the only two modifications that we have for that procedure. Any other thoughts, comments? I'm not getting anything. So I would ask, I'm seeing heads shake back and forth gently.
Yes.
So I'd ask for a motion to pass it along as it is, and we'll get this put into place.
I'll make a motion to pass the traffic enforcement section of procedures.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by V. Everybody in favor say aye.
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 Anybody opposed say nay. Looks like it's unanimous, and we can move on to our final piece. Looks like we're going to get out a little bit early today. Thank you all. Closing comments. Let's go down the line in a similar way. There's been some swapping around, but Will, Davey, we got you first, and then Matt.
No comment. Thank you.
Sweet. Matt, and then Lindsay.
I have no comment either. Thanks.
Lindsay, and then Silver.
Thanks for that last question, V. I think that's a really good one. We had a report at the Civilian Review Board looking at the stops data, and I actually thought having, and I'm totally forgetting the name of the person who came and gave that report from EPD, but I thought it was really helpful and useful, and maybe that's something to flag in the future for the Police Commission to look at if you haven't already, to look at the results from that and to look at the data. I will point out that in some of the categories, we don't have enough data to really say one way or the other because our numbers are so low. They're not like statistically significant enough to make a judgment about whether we're seeing discrimination or not. So it was just kind of like not enough data, but that I was encouraged by being able to see the transparency in the numbers, and it's a significant improvement over anything that we've had in the past. So I guess I would flag that for maybe the future. That might be something the Police Commission wants to look at as well.
Sweet. Thank you. Silver, and then Terry.
Yeah, I just can't wait to get out tomorrow and get my hair done. That's about it. I don't have hair.
Awesome. Terry, and then Amanda.
And I won't be going to the beach either, but everybody stay well, and it was good to see everybody. I'll see you in June.
Awesome. Amanda, and then Alan.
I don't have any comments. Just nice to see everybody.
Alan, and then V.
Yeah, initially I was very disappointed that we didn't get to have a live demonstration of the canine unit. But since we're bringing it back, and we may in fact be together, maybe if we are, maybe we can have an actual live canine unit come and show us what they do.
Yeah, Alan, we may be at a point now where the team and the handler would be comfortable having the dog do that, and so we'll do some digging around on that because I think that'd be pretty cool too. And watching the detection dogs work is it's a cool thing to see.
Yeah. Thanks.
V, and then Jennifer.
I'm just glad to see everybody here on camera, and glad you're all okay. Was thinking about you, during this whole thing. So I'm relieved to see all of you here. Thank you.
Sweet. Jennifer, and then myself.
I don't have any comment, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to thank everybody who managed to make it today. Looking at next month right now, I will probably opt for caution out of an abundance of respect for everybody in their various places. Hopefully there is no bump as things start to reopen, but I will make a determination on that as things proceed. It looks like this format works fairly well. I know it's nice to see attendance so high, which is not always the case. But yeah, thank you all. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Jeremy. And yeah, have a great night, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.